Welcome to the BrettJohnson.biz podcast, where we discuss business on purpose, radically fresh leadership, capital that transforms society, and marketplace stories that embolden difference makers. Welcome to the Repurposing Business podcast. My name is Brett Johnson, author of Lemon Leadership, among other books. And this session is going to focus on lemon leadership and an experience I had. I got an email from a guy who contacted me and said, is there any chance they can get a discount if they order books in bulk? So we got chatting, and it turns out that Ben Blaha comes from a group of companies up in Iowa. And for 10 years, they've been using Lemon Leadership, and they've bought hundreds and hundreds of copies. But since they've purchased them off Amazon, I didn't know that they were a big customer. So since then, we've developed a bit of a relationship. And what we're going into now is a conversation with the CEO, the COO, and Ben to discuss how they've been using Lemon Leadership in their group. I hope you enjoy the conversation. Welcome to the Repurposing Business podcast. This is a first. I have three people at once in the same room, so this is going to be fun. And I guess things come in herds from your part of the world, so this is great. And how about you introduce yourselves and tell us where you are, and then I'm sure some people will want to find that on the map. Bill, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, my name's Bill Evans, and I'm the CEO of Open Gates. And I'll go through a little bit of that background in a little bit. But we're here in Kelowna, Iowa, just a little bit south of Iowa City, just the center of the country, out in a rural area.
Yeah. So, Bill, do you know the geographic center of North America? This is a trivia quiz for you.
Oh, North America. That's a hard one. Denver.
It's Rugby, North Dakota, evidently.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so
now I know.
Not too far from you. Right. Bill, would you like to introduce your team?
Yes, Jeffrey Adams. Jeffrey is the COO here. And I should say we're not big on titles, but that'll give you an idea. Jeffrey's involved in all sides of the production and really everything, as everything works here. And we'll kind of explain how we do business as we go. Ben Blaha, Ben's with us for a couple of years. Ben's been involved in the R&D side of things, getting new products set up, looking at efficiencies within our operation. And all of us have been really quite involved with the Lemon Leadership model. So I think all three of us wanted to be on the program and share our thoughts.
Fantastic. Yeah. So you have a unique situation. One day, Ben tracked me down and said, hey, can I get some cheap books? I think something like that, right, Ben?
Yeah.
So Ben is the designated negotiator, where you go to. So Ben came and we chatted, and I asked what they'd been doing. And at the Open Gates group, which is quite a big group of companies, to my surprise, and this is one of the downsides of selling books off Amazon, you don't know who the customer is. It's not like you know who's consuming the product unless people buy directly. And I was surprised that you guys had bought hundreds of books and had been working with Lemon Leadership for a long time. So we're going to unpack that story. But perhaps before we do that, tell us a bit about the business. You say your mission is to create value and enrich lives by building businesses that uplift families and strengthen small town communities. That's a huge need. And tell us how you do that and what the focus of that group of businesses are.
Okay, so Open Gates, you could look at it as a business incubator. We've got 11 to 12 small companies that we've grown over time. Basically, got started in the early 2000s. Our primary product is organic dairy, which we've got here some examples of that. We have a full line of dairy that's now in all 50 states. We're pretty much in a niche within a niche in the organic market, but ours is a minimally processed product. So we started with that kind of built into other enterprises we have. So included in all of it, we've got a trucking and logistics company, we've got a retail store, milk brokering, ingredient business and a few other things with that. So, it's hard not to get into the book, but I'm your entrepreneur to where we see opportunity and we've jumped into that. So that's what we've done the last 20 years. We truly are in a rural area. It's been kind of fun to work through these things, and we've just had opportunities come to us.
Fantastic. Now you have a bunch of suppliers who are smaller independent farmers. Is that right? They've got herds of cattle, from what I understand, sort of less than about 35 on average. Is that right?
Yeah. Most of our producers, from a milk supply standpoint, are Amish. In fact, our company, the initial start of the company was that the Amish people came to us and said, could you set up a facility to process our milk? Because they really want to have a vibrant farm community. They don't want to get into having to work in factories and things like that. They'd like to have their kids step into farming just as they have. So that's kind of the genesis of it. We started that. Most of our farms are, 40. I mean, we got some bigger than that, some smaller, but 40 cows, which is really small. And the biggest cluster of them are right here, 10 miles away from us.
Okay, so I have a question for you guys. I understand that your farmers name all of their cows. So what's the most common cow name? Yeah, come on.
Oh gosh, I can't remember. I don't know that.
Yeah, I don't either.
Yeah.
You don't?
Sorry.
Oh. Well, there we go. You'll have to survey your farmers.
Yeah, we will. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. Good. I guess we could always opt to get some of these cows named after the Lemon Leadership model if we work hard at the.
Yeah, that's right. Or named after us. I don't know.
There we go.
I don't think they named Bill out there, probably.
Bill's a bull, I think. Yeah. Great. Okay. And Bill, you've also recently published a book, Open Gates, Helping Monday Morning Ministers Access Heaven's Resources to Bring God's Kingdom to Earth. It's quite a mouthful, but it's a great concept.
Yes. It's kind of just my story of how I walk through, pretty much from a leadership standpoint. How it's developed in my life, how I look at it. We've developed here in the company, values and mission, and just how this has all flavored that, and how it's worked for me, how I've worked through it, and hopefully it would help others as they're struggling with the same types of things, as trying to figure out what their purpose is and how they fit into it. And again, Lemon Leadership had a role in that. So I appreciate that.
Fantastic. Great. So we'll put a link to the book. It's up on Amazon. We'll put a link in the show notes so people can access it. And good. Okay. So having covered a little bit of what you do, including all the way down to, I see you now have a brewery that you're working on that's doing non-alcoholic beer. Is that right?
Yeah. We're working with some partners. I mean, part of our story is collaboration. We've reached out to great partners, and we have some people that are working with us, and we just kind of stepped into that. Seems a little bit odd, but that industry is somewhat at the same place organics dairy was back when we started that, in that it's growing quickly, and we just thought it would be a good thing to step into, and we're excited about it. We've got a first customer out there, and we plan to launch in October.
Fantastic. You've probably seen the book In Search of God in Guinness, the Guinness story, which is a fun read, which goes back a long time. And so, fantastic. Good. Great. Anything else on the company that you wanted to share before we jump in to talk a little bit about Lemon Leadership, or about the group of companies, I should say?
What about you guys? Was there something I missed?
I don't think so.
Yeah. Okay. Let's head into it. Maybe we'll think of things we got.
Okay. So I'm curious to know, how did you come across Lemon Leadership? Did somebody recommend it, or how did you come across it?
Yeah, actually, my son runs a drug and alcohol rehab center here in Kelowna. And a pastor he was working with gave him a copy and said, hey, take a read. This will be helpful to you. So he then passed it along to me. I read it, liked it. We started talking within the company. I can't remember if we shared books. one at that time, but we then just started having conversations about it, started to try to figure ourselves out.
Yeah.
I somewhat enjoy that part of it. I like Myers-Briggs, I've been into all those kind of personality tests.
Yeah.
So this was very interesting, and we just slowly kind of applied it, and it's kind of just started going into different parts of the company, starting with our director team, and then moving down now to where we're doing other management levels, and really almost everybody we've kind of tried to apply it to.
Yeah.
And we
Great.
put them in on the conversations, and
Uh-huh.
yes.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, I'll have to send a thank you note to that pastor who recommended it to your son.
Okay. All right. Okay. Yeah. Well, that's how it works. So we pass the book along, and it's been impactful for us.
And for how long has this been going on?
Jeffrey, why don't you chime in on that? Do you remember how long?
I think it's coming up on 10 years, maybe.
Yeah.
Right around 10 years.
Great. And from what I understand, maybe Ben, you can tell us a little bit. Do you have discussion groups around this within the different segments of the organization? How does that work out? Because you're fairly new, so I would imagine you went through a process of getting inculcated with this as you came in the door. What did that look like for you?
Yeah, so Bill and Jeffrey introduced me to the book actually during the interview process, and
Yeah.
through that had me read the book, talk about it a little bit with them to get a better sense of my personality type and how that might be a good fit for the company.
Yeah.
It was, and here we are. But internally now, Jeffrey in particular is leading a lot of group discussions. It's been super helpful for myself, especially, meeting with a diverse group from many different departments. We've got a lot of different individuals in this location that we're sitting in now.
Yeah.
Work in a diverse parts of the company.
Okay.
So it's very helpful to hear their perspectives, talk about maybe their styles of leadership, how maybe they would unpack different scenarios or situations, how they would view it versus how maybe I would view it. So
Yeah.
very, very helpful from that standpoint. And I think, personally, in the 2 years that I've been here, I've seen a lot of growth within our leadership teams and how we walk through to come to resolution on maybe if there's a disagreement on something. We go back to this book and say, well, hey, how are you looking at it? How can I step into your shoes and
Yeah.
better understanding of how that looks. So been very, very helpful for myself, and these guys have been great leaders in that way.
Fantastic. So, Jeffrey, have you been gearing this around situations? So you come across a decision-making situation or a problem with a customer or in production or deciding whether to develop a product, and you apply it into a situation? Or have you been saying, okay, this is the curriculum that you have in your head and you kind of work through it logically, or is it a combination?
I think it's a combination. The discussion groups that Ben's referring to, I try to do those. I guess on kind of an as needed basis. I like the groups of people that I work with. So I'm working with our leadership, like our broad leadership team, but I'm also working with pretty much all of the managers across the company or company. Right. And I like to be able to have a shared vocabulary when we're working through scenarios. I like to understand the type of person I'm working with so that I can change my approach a little bit, maybe with how I communicate or when I communicate, depending on their personality type. And so that's those groups I'm setting up. I think I just finished a couple. There was probably 8 or 10 people in this building, and I was doing one in one of our other buildings that probably had another 8 or 10, but they were coming from all different areas. So I think it's also been helpful in getting, especially I'm trying to get, when we have newer managers, I'm trying to get them through fairly quickly.
Yeah.
So we're hiring a lot. So there's always kind of a new group of people.
Yeah.
Anybody that's, a lot of times, anybody that would have any kind of supervisory capacity, because I want part of what we're trying to do is have a uniform experience for people in different areas across the company. And I think it can be very powerful if the leader in an area, if they're just a lead or a supervisor, to be able to understand the strengths and weaknesses of the people on their team, and then understand how to communicate with them, and be able to have expectations for individuals that are more suited to their like Lemon leadership style. We try to expect, an organizer to be the person that sits at a desk and audits paperwork all day.
Yeah.
Days a week. So we try to have realistic expectations for people. And then as far as how it applies in the day to day, I actually had a situation this morning, a couple issues with a production area, and I talked to our operations guy, and I called him specifically because he's got a lot of organizer, and I wanted to make sure that we were taking, a measured, detailed approach to the outcome of the situation, and suggested a couple, longer term changes that we could look at.
Yeah.
Trying to use that to have better long-term outcomes.
So not just chewing gum and a quick fix, right? That you have to fix again next week. Yeah.
I knew if I didn't call, that would be what we had.
Yeah, very interesting. So Bill, it sounds like this has become a cultural thing in a sense that it's gone beyond, here's just read a book, but it's become part of the culture. It sounds, Jeffrey, that's a bit that you're describing, where you've got some uniformity, that there's a common language, and a common language often frames a culture. Bill, would you say, looking back over the last 10 years, that you've now got Lemon leadership as part of your culture?
Oh, I'd say for sure, probably a big part of our culture, because that's it. I mean, we've had these meetings. I don't know if the ones Jeffrey's been leading more with the Lemon leadership, they're conversations.
Mm-hmm.
They're voluntary for the most part. They're close to voluntary, but so people read the book and there's discussion. So we want it to be from the heart. We want people to get it deep down, because we do want a culture change, or maybe not say change, but continue to improve our culture. And Lemon leadership's been a big part of that. We spend, every 2 weeks we have a director team meeting that's pretty much about culture. And we find that very important as we move forward, that it isn't, I can go to a story from the past, is we, early on, it was before we had a mission statement or guiding principles, we had situations where at one point our entire second shift quit, and another time we fired the entire second shift. So at that point, I was sitting in my office thinking, I love my job. I love the people I'm interacting with, but apparently it's not going through the entire company. It's not everybody's experience. So that's why we started to walk into more intentional cultural things, and it's just part of growing. We have about 120 employees now. Back then, 25, 30, something like that. So I start getting further away from the group. Leadership gets further away, and we really need to have that culture that's driving things.
Right. Good. So Jeffrey, you talked about aligning people's work with how they're wired. So if you understand their type, you can. I remember once being in Indonesia, and we were working with a head office of this. It was a direct sales company that was selling colostrum, which is in your industry roughly, I think.
Yeah. Familiar with it.
Yeah, so you're familiar with it. And so they were getting this product from New Zealand and then selling it in Indonesia. And they'd grown from 0 to 250,000 field reps, distributors, in 3 years. So it was like the fastest growing direct sales company in the world. The CEO was a classic networker. That's what he was. He was like a networker entrepreneur. The people out in the field were entrepreneurs, most of them, and sort of entrepreneur, organizer, networker types. And the head office was filled with managers. And it was a huge cultural clash between the field and a lot of the people working. And so getting the alignment of who people are to the work that they're doing is pretty important. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
understanding who you are has been a big deal with us. It's just trying to figure that out. My background was accounting and finance, so you assume that I would be manager organizer,
Yeah.
but always migrated out of the detail. So knowing that and then stepping into that has been beneficial for me.
Yeah, it's important, as you say, Bill, to distinguish what your training is from what your wiring is.
Yeah.
I had the same thing when I worked at Price Waterhouse. What they valued was managers. You had an assistant manager, a senior manager. That was the career path. And I had another guy that I met who'd been a bank manager and in the financial service. And I listened to this guy and I thought, this guy's a luminary. He's not a manager at all. He doesn't have any verbs in his sentences. He doesn't finish his sentences. He talks about ideas and so on. And he sat in some lemon leadership sessions and he quit and he went off and he wrote a book and he wanders around talking about his book.
Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's good. So strengths and weaknesses. Jeffrey, how's that been playing out in the organization, identifying strengths and weaknesses?
I guess, are you talking about in relation to lemon leadership?
Yeah, yeah. So when you're sitting down with a group of people, are you dialed into what their strengths and weaknesses are likely to be?
Yeah, for sure. I was going to say, I don't really think of it as weaknesses per se. I guess they are weaknesses, but what I try to talk about with, when we're doing the roundtables is that there's not like a right or a wrong answer from the standpoint of how the book is, but it's very important to recognize the things that we're good at and lean into those.
Yeah.
It's definitely helped from the standpoint of, like I mentioned, not putting an organizer at a desk with 8 hours of paperwork. Though we have experimented with that.
Yeah.
I think in the earlier years, we would hire people that looked like they had a skill set, no understanding of that personality type. And then we would watch them fail for like a year. And if we liked them, maybe try to like reposition them.
Yeah.
So I think, I don't think it's totally permeated the organization yet, but at least with myself or, Bill and probably a couple of our other longer standing leaders, we try to incorporate questions into an interview process that kind of help us understand coming in what the person might be like.
Yeah.
I had three people I interviewed last week that were for higher level positions, and just from talking to them, I could have been happy hiring any of them for a specific role. But by getting a little bit more nuanced with the lemon leadership type, I was able to pick one that I thought would be the most successful in that role. And then I had an idea for one of the other ones that was a better fit for them. And I had a conversation with them, in the interview and just said, hey, kind of talking about these things. And I would explain, here's the questions I'm asking and why. But then just saying, I think for this role, I have someone else that's maybe slightly better suited, but I really like, kind of what you have going on, but I have a different path that I think we could integrate you into. And they were open to it. They're coming back this week. So hopefully they end up joining. So it's been really impactful in that way.
Yeah, I do have some clients who we have an open bank of assessments for them. So they have a code and they give it to people during the interviewing process because as Ben probably figured out, you can fake it during an interview, right, Ben? You can pretend to be a manager. You can pretend to be once you know what they're looking for. And that is a problem with interviews is that particularly in the United States, people are really, really good at packaging themselves. And they'll know from the job description, from reading your websites, etc., what you're after. And so taking an actual assessment or asking questions that get to the root of how somebody's wired can be useful.
I also typically give them a copy of the book to take it. So I have an idea when they're leaving pretty much what they are, but then I ask them to read at least, I think it's either the first, in the third edition, it's either the first, it's the first 6 chapters.
Yeah.
And I just give them a brief overview and say, hey, can you read these first 6? Text, let me know what you think. And lately with that approach, people have been pretty accurate coming back with like what I think they are. Sometimes I can't get a great read on somebody. I'm much better at identifying managers, organizers, entrepreneurs. Luminary and network are a little bit harder. Well, networker is easy enough. Luminary is a little bit harder for me.
Yeah.
And I actually had an interview a few weeks ago, and I got done and I was like, that was weird. I can't quite figure out what they are. The questions they asked were odd for the role, and then sent a book with them. And a couple days later, I got a text, and the lady said, "I think I'm a luminary," and I was like, "Oh, that's
why you're weird, right? Yeah. No, that's true. Well, there's quite a few luminaries I've worked with that actually just think they're from another planet. I was working with a company in Northern California in the media space, and we did an exercise, and then after, like a half-day workshop. And at the end, I just asked everybody just for a little bit of feedback. And this one guy was last, and he just said, I thought I was weird. I thought I was the only one on the planet that thought the way I did, and so on. And he was just a luminary on steroids, and he just thought he was the only one in the world like that. And so sometimes luminaries have a bit of trouble figuring out who they are as well. So there we go. Yeah, but we'll just give you a weird bucket, Jeffrey. You can just put
yeah. And it's definitely not that there's not a place for that person or those people, but I was interviewing for like a production engineer that was supposed to do like day-to-day troubleshooting operations. And the questions that were being asked were much more broad. We were doing a facility tour, and it was a much more broad question. And I was like, we're way off in the weeds compared to like problem that's like directly in front of us. So
yeah, that's what they say with the luminaries, where the rubber hits the clouds. It's like at 30,000 feet. That's right. Yeah. Okay. So, Bill, what would you say have been some of the challenges in terms of, or any of you, in terms of getting people, what concepts of lemon leadership have people sort of bumped into where they say, yeah, this is a bit difficult to fathom, and where you've had to circle the wagons and go around and have more conversations? Or has it been pretty straightforward?
Well, I guess my thoughts, and you guys can jump in here too, is just even getting started. There's people that don't want to be, and I'm a little bit that way. They don't want to be typecast or whatever. They don't want to, or they don't want to be what they are. There can be some of that too. So that part of it, just getting people open and saying, there's no good or bad here. This is all important, to our organization, every single aspect of this. To get people convinced of that, to feel kind of free to open up and to, step into their, gifting. Boy, what else has been difficult? That's been kind of the main thing, right? To get people to just free up and realize who they are.
Yeah.
That's
an
end of it. It then seems like they become free and able then to look around. I look at myself, your question before on the weaknesses. We've had this concept that we got, I can't remember who pioneered this, but being spiked individuals. And we're all kind of spiked in certain ways. So if we look at that we're a team here, you have these spikes and we all offset the other ends of it and all focus into the things that, if we want to say strengths, the way we're wired and have passion for, once we can convince people of that and it just feels safe, that seems to work for it. I guess the interesting one, we can pick on Ben a little bit because he's got manager. For me, it was always personally interacting with the manager. And this helped me because I better understand the thinking. Because from an entrepreneur, and I'm the second, I'm a luminary. It's like we'd always hit heads and butt heads together. Together. And I could even be demotivating in the aspect of, this is, I would say things like it's a piece of cake, or we'll figure that out as we go, which I truly believe in, and that's what I tell myself to make myself not get nervous about the things that we're doing. But it doesn't work, for other people, because they're like, no, we gotta we need to know now, we need to know the details. So for me personally, it's been that interaction, probably the one that I've learned the most. I was telling Ben before this, it's like the people that have been managers in my life have probably helped me the most in that I've learned how to interact better. I'm able to more think, instead of thinking how I look at it, looking at it how they look at it.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, Ben, just to encourage you, that managers are the slice of the lemon that people sort of love to hate. People
Yes.
don't like the managers, the systems, their logic, their attention to detail, their order, and all that kind of stuff until something goes wrong. The wheels come off, and
Yeah.
then like, yeah, we need a manager, and so it's a very interesting one. And
I think we've learned, starting the company, being entrepreneurial, or starting as an entrepreneur, you know, the people that were closest to me were organizers, Jeffrey and people like that, because they just go and do it,
yeah,
and that's worked very well. What's been hard for us as an organization is kind of pass the baton in areas to the
yeah,
manager so that, our systems, we make the same milk every day instead of it always being an artisan project, which it has been sometimes.
yeah,
That's been kind of a challenge for us. We do recognize it. I recognize it. And we're starting to, Jeffrey was sharing, we're starting to be more intentional about how we hire and how we look at things so that,
yeah.
not all sitting around here, entrepreneurs and luminaire, we actually need those processes. We need, even more so, we need people that monitor those processes, maintain those processes. And the manager is just real critical to that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a big point, because what luminaries and entrepreneurs often struggle with is that handoff, so they are deluded a bit to think they can do everything. And then, of course, they get bored doing it the second or third time. And so then it becomes a bit sloppy. But if they can be prone to not saying, okay, I am going to hand this thing off and I'll go on and do another business. I'll go and initiate another product or something else, but I am going to hand it off, and have the discipline of handing it off. And we've certainly seen that there's a converse to that, which is you want to do a new product idea and you put a manager in charge and the thing gets bogged down while they hire a secretary and put a Gantt chart together and a detailed budget and everything. And then the entrepreneur is thinking, man, I could have done this 3 times already.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the opposite side. And we had a company that was working in South Africa, and they got a big contract to develop a new situation, but they only had 5 months to do it. And the client said, you'll never do it in 5 months, but this is all you've got. So they understood Lemon leadership. So they didn't put a manager on the team. They just put entrepreneurs, luminaries on the team, and got the thing roughed out in about 3 months very quickly. And then they put some adult supervision onto the job to sort out all of the mess and repackage it with a budget and everything. And they got the whole thing done in record time, but by having the right people in at the right time. Just back to your earlier comment, Bill, I like the fact that, and Jeffrey, you mentioned this as well, that you are valuing all 5 types. And I think that's a problem in a company. If they know, oh, we only value networkers or luminaries or managers, then other people start faking it and they end up. So I like the fact that you're valuing all 5 types.
Yeah. And I mean, we need to. I mean, it's, again, we're a team here. We need all aspects of that.
Yeah.
If I can go back to one of your comment just before this, you wonder, you only include luminaries or entrepreneurs on a team. How do you work with the managers then, because they feel excluded in a lot of ways, from being involved early on in a project, even though, at that point, it's better suited having those other giftings, as I call it. How do you work through that?
Yeah. I think one of the things that's good, as you would have done, is to just recognize, as Ben mentioned earlier, there are different perspectives. It's not right or wrong, and we need to get all of the perspectives. So we're gonna, even if you're in a small team, if it's just the 3 of you and none of you are a networker, well, then you can at least ask yourself the question, how would a networker think about this? Or we'll go and get one. We'll pull one into the meeting because we've come up with this idea, this system or whatever. But we need to ask a networker, what would a customer think of this? Would they pay for this? Would they like the positioning, the packaging, et cetera, et cetera? So I think by recognizing all of them, I mean, I think you have to fight the tendency as well. I had a lot of organizers on my team and one or two serious managers, and the managers put the process in place. This is because I'm an idea hamster. They told me, I keep generating ideas and the organization can't absorb them and so on. And so the manager put a process in place. This is how we're going to filter new product ideas. You can have all of the ideas you like, but they're going to go through the spreadsheet, basically waiting and all of this stuff. So then what I found myself doing is I'd come up with an idea and I'd sneak around to an organizer who would just start working on it, without telling the manager. And yeah, so
we've never done that, or I've never done that. That is something that's a temptation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it is a temptation, isn't it? Yeah. And it's so at least understanding that you can say, okay, hold on, I've got to check myself over here because, or the other thing I've done, because I'm a luminary manager, I'll agree to a process. Okay, this is our process. And next week I circumvent the process that I just agreed to because I don't have I'm not a first slice manager that will even remember what I agreed to last week. So yeah. So
I think the net that you've said before, Bill, is you want time to explore before we take it to like a group that has managers, because you know that there's going to be a lot of questions and you want to at least maybe rule some of the things out yourself before we get that far.
Yeah, and be with those people that I've connected with that I can go through that process of just figuring out what I'm thinking. And I'm also in the Myers-Briggs, I have the feeler part of it, so also a little bit sensitive about sharing things and being told how hard that's going to be.
Yeah.
At a certain stage, hopefully gotten better at, once you work it through, that's like, okay, that's not going to work and let it go,
Yeah.
But at the initial stage, I feel like you need to explore, no matter how crazy the idea is, you need to explore it to see if there is some potential there.
Right. Yeah, well, if it's any consolation, Bill, I don't tell my wife generally when I'm writing a book until it's done. Because she's more on the entrepreneur, organizer, networker side, and she's like, well, why don't you sell the ones you already wrote before you write another one?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah. No, so it's interesting knowing the timing of when you bring people in. That's different timing versus saying, well, I'm never going to tell a manager about this, or I'm never going to tell a network about this, or a luminary. Yeah. So it is good to know when to socialize the thing. There is a danger, however, if you're not deliberate about this, which you guys are, is that you end up hiring people who are the same as you. So in the early days, you gravitate towards the entrepreneurs, the luminaries, and so on. Or if you're a manager, you want to hire managers. We had a company in Texas that hired a new VP, senior vice president of compliance. And in a few weeks, she drew up a list of everybody she wanted to fire. And she wanted to fire everybody who wasn't a manager because she was a manager, and she, by gut, she knew. And then we just said, no, you're going to need these other people to turn this business around. It's not going to help just to have people who look like you. So,
yeah. I wonder if certain lemon leadership types are more prone to that.
Yeah.
I think even before I understood lemon leadership, I realized I needed to have detailed people. I was a CFO and controller. So I knew I needed to have detailed people because I wasn't detailed.
Yeah.
Another thing is, it's easy for me because I need people that can get the job done, I'm not out there doing everything. I'm not inclined to do that, so that made it easy for me, where if you are more inclined, good at the detail, it might make it harder for you to see the value of the others. I've questioned, since I'm sitting as an entrepreneur luminary, how the entrepreneur luminary fits underneath a manager or the other type of managers. Is there enough room for that person to vibe, or do they do like the individual you mentioned before, quit, write a book, and talk about their book the rest of the time. How does that work, and how do we prepare? There'll be a time I leave,
Yeah.
and how do you prepare for that?
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting because in the growth cycle of a group of companies or in the growth cycle of a company, companies can tend to lose their innovation. Some years ago, Cisco Systems hired us to help them with innovation because they felt that they were losing their innovative edge. And what happens is that as the corporate structure grows, if you like, then people who are entrepreneurial feel like there isn't room for them. So it's easier for them to go off. People even do this in the church world. Some guy's an associate pastor or whatever, and he decides, well, it's going to just be easier for me to go and start my own thing than to wait it out and deal with the politics and the boards and all of this kind of stuff. So some companies will give, as you know, famously, they give their staff some time to work on new things that are just not part of the everyday. So that's one way they do it. The other is to create a culture of innovation where you value innovation, recognizing that each of the 5 types innovate differently. And so I've just written a book called Inspired Innovation, and it really helps when people know that they can innovate where they are. And because you really have a business incubator type situation, and you're sitting at, say, 12 companies now, 10 companies, and you say, well, our plan is to go to 12 or 15 or 20 companies. So there's room for you to propose something within the organization, and we're not going to stifle you. So that's part of the culture that you're creating, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Whether those people how well they report to managers, it depends on how those managers are leading. If the managers are secure in their identity and they're not threatened by the entrepreneurs or the others coming up with great ideas, it makes a huge difference. But insecure leaders, whether they're luminaries, managers, networkers, whatever, insecure leaders are a bit of a problem.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, 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 good. Yep. Have you done anything in terms of, and this is a tricky one, like compensation structures? You talked about aligning the expectations for a job, Jeffrey, with what they do. So you're not going to ask an organizer to go through a pile of paper every day. How about how you reward people? How's that working out across your group of companies?
Yeah, I don't know if we've tied that together yet. I think we're doing it the same as we always had.
Yeah.
Look at the employee. Being smaller companies, we probably look at the individual more than having a process.
Yeah.
Looking at their performance and who they are and what they're able to accomplish, the value that individual brings.
Yeah.
I don't believe we've really intentionally tied it to Lemon leadership. There's probably something underneath it that does something there.
Yeah.
So no, and that's be something I would be curious of learning more about.
Yeah.
I think we've had conversations. It's much less about like individuals or roles, but like Bill and I have had conversations about how like our free market economy values different types of work.
Yeah.
And I think that the way things naturally seem to work, if you have like a luminary, maybe an entrepreneur or a networker, like those people tend to fall into, well, I feel like luminaries can either be the lowest paid people around or the highest. There's like a handful that get paid really well, then there's a whole bunch that can't quite seem to get anything together. Your entrepreneurs, I feel like they tend to fall into roles that are more money or commission driven. So you have, they're either a startup or they're running, something where they can get paid a commission. So they have kind of unlimited earning potential. And I think your networkers, they often fall into sales roles.
Yeah. Yeah.
Those people are getting paid really well.
Yeah.
I think what I've kind of thought about some is like your manager, tends to fall into a category that is less valued.
Yeah.
we've had, this is actually, Bill, this would be in a specific example. We had a person working for us for like 10 years, reliable, conscientious, hardworking, really into the detail, really cared about the company, really cared about the outcomes, but was in a role that's, typically it's just, it's not a highly compensated role. They're not an exec or something along those lines. And I think with that person, we talked about doing some extra raises just because of appreciating that person, not because we couldn't replace that position for significantly less money.
More individual oriented. You know, we've had conversations about the fact that typically in the past, people move up as they take on more responsibility, or they add people that report to them. Well, not everybody's a good, if we just say a manager, the broad term of manager, but they have great value. So we tried to work our way through that. I think Jeffrey's add what Jeffrey's saying. I think those like entrepreneur, some luminaries, the networkers have more of calling their own shot. I mean, they could make as much as they want to apply themselves to, so there's maybe an unlimited amount where the manager maybe gets in a role where they're a tradesperson or they're a detailed person that moves up differently, and to look at that. One of the things as we're sitting here, I think about the fact that Jeffrey and I typically think, we've got great opportunities here. People step in, apply themselves, and they can be whoever, but then we get frustrated because there's other people who would say, show us the pathway, lay out this thing. And we expect everybody to be the entrepreneur, whatever, that moves through and does that, to where we're maybe not good at that yet, but we need to adjust to that, to say, okay, we need to show a pathway for some people. And that's fine. It's good, because we kind of value more somebody that comes in and just goes at it,
Yeah.
Because that's what we did.
Yeah, sure. That's actually one of the things that turned on the light bulb for me as I developed Lemon Leadership, back in the 1990s, was when some guy said to me, Brett, just tell me exactly what you want me to do. And then, I'll make it happen. And I thought, well, if I have to tell you exactly, then what are you going to do? But this guy was a manager, and he knew my exactly was like at 20,000 feet, and his exactly was at ground level. And so it can seem an insult for a luminary or an entrepreneur to tell somebody that here's the path, this is what you got to do, and so forth. And so recognizing that, and that some people need that, and that's what they want, is really, really important. The other way is to have an alternative. Your HR people want you to have fair and square, everybody gets paid according to this formula. You can never get sued. But people want to get rewarded different ways. So it's to have the informal recognition structure, because, and so you can do it in an informal way. There's that great book, Encouraging the Heart, which gives you many, many ways to encourage people, but keep the comp structures, etc., the same. So yeah, that's interesting. Good. Well, I think one of the things that you've talked about or alluded to is the underpinning of plural leadership, the construct. In America, often it's, there's the president, the CEO, and it's a hierarchical thing, whereas the framing behind Lemon Leadership is really, it's a plurality, it's a team of people. And the job of the CEO, the chairman, is to figure out who should be leading in any different scenario, not always just wanting to be the top dog. And that can be difficult for people to comprehend, because it's a little bit different to the org charts that we got out of the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah, I think that's true. And just the whole concept, and I kind of covered that in my book a little bit, to where you have that prototypical CEO, coach, whatever, tough guy, and really looking at it differently and looking at it from that aspect. Now, for me, that comes easy because that's just been a natural approach. But I can see where it would be harder for others to look at things. I mean, I love the team thing. My favorite word, one of them anyways, collaboration. I really think magic can happen when you're collaborating. So I really like this Lemon Leadership, in that, you're recognizing everybody in the importance of everybody.
Yeah. So Ben, a question for you as we head towards the end of things over here. Do you find as a manager, tell me your profile again, are you a manager first?
I have entrepreneur is first and then manager. So I think
Okay.
that really helps the three of us working very well together.
Yeah.
We all have that trait in common.
Yeah, and by the way, we do work well together.
Yes, we do.
I hope
We
that's
do.
Yeah.
your wife would say too when you come home and
My
talk.
wife is a strong manager. So
Is
it's
she?
funny how that dynamic plays out. But yeah, I think that entrepreneur side of things, all of us having that in common really helps us work well together. Yes,
Yeah.
I do have that side of me, that manager that wants to come out and build structure. But for me, that's been a unique advantage in my mind, is having the flexibility to work with your guys' types. You guys have lots of ideas. I'm trying to keep up with those ideas and push them forward. And so it is easier for me to, maybe create some structure and help push that along in that way. So that's something that I've noticed as we've worked together.
And we want that, we want Ben to be that guy, so that's the key of that's his passion, the entrepreneur manager, and we need that. So he's fit really well into this role.
Yeah.
We hired specifically for that reason.
Yeah.
I think for this role, we were looking for somebody that had manager, and then ideally it worked out well to have entrepreneur. If you have organizer, because Bill doesn't have organizer, and manager organizer is not as smooth an interaction.
Yeah.
So to have, we both share, the three of us share entrepreneur, so the communication part works, and then Ben goes away, does lots of detailed stuff, comes back.
Yeah.
He's got spreadsheets.
Well, and it works well with quality, with our quality department. You've got a lot of, you've got a quality individual that's probably very manager focused and focused on really the nuance and the detail to make sure that we have consistency. And so it makes that segue well into a setting.
In this case, Jeffrey and I were self-aware to know that, we could just sit around here. If we got another manager, another entrepreneur luminary, we just sit around and come up with ideas that we never do, so Ben's provided that structure that's really kept us on task.
Fantastic. So it's great that you become a bridge to the rest of the organization then, Ben, translating some of what you guys are talking about into things that other people can understand. Yes. Good. Excellent. Okay. So any closing thoughts on how would you recommend, well, let me just ask you, would you recommend this for other organizations? So if you looked out to other companies and so on, what would you tell them about Lemon Leadership, and what would your recommendation be?
Yeah, well, guys, help me out, but we'd recommend it. I mean, it's been it's had a very positive impact on our company. I think even beyond business entities, we've talked about churches would benefit a lot from being able to recognize the different aspects of Lemon Leadership. Just about probably government. I haven't thought about it that much, but I think that could be helpful too. But I think it's a key thing to understand how people interact. I think the other thing that I would say is, because I have done Myers-Briggs and that, and I like it a lot, but it's more complicated. And this really does it in a simple way, but powerful, in that you can really jump into this and understand it fairly quickly and apply it. So, I'm a big proponent, and I don't know if you guys have something more to add to it.
Yeah, I mean, I would strongly recommend, if you're trying to implement this in a company, what's been most impactful to me has been not only just reading the book, but having a common understanding of it, having those discussions with different levels of management around it, to get a better understanding of, well, here's a perspective, from my point of view, what's the perspective from your point of view? How do we come to the best outcome? Ultimately, that's the goal, right? And for us to work the best together, I think that has been super helpful, at least for myself. And I'd strongly recommend that for any company out there that's trying to implement this.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a key point. The reason that we're doing the kind of the roundtable discussion groups on this is, earlier on, somebody might read the book by themselves, and it's very hard for them to really click with anything that doesn't match their type.
Right.
It helps a lot to sit across from somebody that's one of the other types, and then kind of through that discussion and exploring these concepts, you really do get the perspective, you're like, oh, you see it completely different than I see it.
Yeah.
So that's super helpful. I think for me personally, getting into this book, I have a lot of stories from over the years that, as we kind of implemented this, that I use in our roundtable discussions. But what it did for me was allow me to, or give me the freedom to only be good at a couple things.
Yeah.
I think previous to that, I was focused on appearing to be good at everything.
Yeah.
Bill always used to say, you just have to believe somebody else is going to do it better than you will. And but I don't believe that. So I can't hand it off.
Yeah.
But then I realized, I was really just kidding myself. You're living in your own delusion. I could do the thing better than whoever I was going to hand it off to. But the reality was I was never going to actually do it.
Yeah.
It's in my inbox for 3 months and then I'm going to give up on it. Instead of being like, maybe they won't approach it the same way I will, but they'll at least do something. We'll make progress.
Yeah.
But that was really key to be free to just be the couple things that I am. And that's a big part of what we talk about in the roundtable discussions, is getting people to feel okay that they're a manager and they're not an entrepreneur, or feel okay that they're an organizer and not a manager. And then once you kind of have that open discussion and people have kind of that freedom to be who they are, it's crazy how much better they can function, how much better they can do their jobs, and not feel like the person sitting next to them is judging them because they're approaching something like an organizer. The last group that we went through in that team, they had a really strong manager that was like, I want to write SOPs, and somebody else that was like, I just want to go put out a fire somewhere, and before that, the person with the SOPs might be like, well, why won't they sit down and like really detail this out? And the other person's like, why are they always hassling me? And now they're just like, you go handle the fire. I'm going to type up this SOP, and they're happy.
Yeah. Yeah.
That doesn't happen without some understanding and intentionality. So that's been really cool to see. And then one other thing that I personally am really happy about is just from these last couple roundtables that we did, I had multiple people from each group kind of talk to me on the side and talk about how they're applying this, in their home life, improved their communication with their spouse, how it's given them a different perspective on how to interact with their kids. So that was impactful for me to feel like we're doing something. One person commented, they never expected to get something from their work that was going to help them in their personal life. So I think those things are cool.
Great. Yeah, that's good to hear, Jeffrey. And we began to see that over the years, a whole bunch of marriages. And sometimes we had one couple, their marriage was fine, but they had 3 teenage boys and they were just butting heads. And my brother went and worked with them. This was in South Africa. And, they got an understanding. And these were great kids, but just wired differently. And so that's one of the reasons I ended up writing the little book, Lemon for Lovers, and doing a separate assessment. And if we had more time, I would put Ben on the spot and ask him a bit about how it's going with his.
It's good.
Yeah. And so it is good to see that overflow application. And I would say sometimes in the church realm, it's a bit of a challenge, because when you get into a faith-based organization, they're pretty convinced that their perspective comes from God.
Yeah.
And the other guys are just a little off center. Yeah. So it's good. It's good that you can figure that stuff out. Well, thank you so much. These are really, really thoughtful insights. And thank you so much for buying so many books, for taking people through this, and for having it as part of your culture and part of your organization. Really appreciate that, and appreciate your insights that you've shared with us. And that's been great. And look forward to sharing this with other people. Any closing thoughts?
Yeah. Thank you for the book, and look forward to maybe reading some of your other ones.
Well, thanks for being part of that conversation, listening in on our discussion about how The Open Gates group has applied Lemon Leadership at their group, and just a couple of things to highlight for you. One is that we have group assessments. So we have a back-end portal that enables people to go in and not just do an individual assessment, which you can do. You can just order that off brettjohnson.biz. But there's also a group assessment where I send out a code and a link. Everybody in the company can take it, and then I aggregate the results and pull together the results for the group. And you'll find out where you're missing certain slices of leadership, how people are wired. We talk about communications and so on. So I'll pull those results together. And then often what I'll do is I'll do a read back of those results. So we'll hop on a Zoom call. If you're located close by or somewhere in the area, you want me to fly to you, I can do that as well. And then in that case, I'd probably do an all-day workshop with you. So I have a series of workshops around Lemon Leadership, dealing with how you hire people, build teams, communications, do work, product development, the blending of Lemon Leadership and agile software development, how you can speed up the product development process, improve sales, etc. I actually have a series of 5 assessments, and the first is the basic Lemon Leadership assessment. There's one for Lemon for Lovers that's part of the Lemon for Lovers class, which you can sign up for on a self-study basis. You get both assessments when you do that. We have an assessment around legacy. What do you want to leave behind? What do you want to give to future generations? How do you think about legacy? And then also around communications and operations. So be in touch. It's amazing when you can take these constructs, and as you'll hear, or as you just heard on the call from Jeffrey, the power comes when you discuss it in a group. Many organizations have benefited from the group assessment, where whether as a family or a church group, a nonprofit, a business, a government entity, they have seen the profiles of others. They've understood their colleagues better. They've figured out how to dialogue, how to depoliticize or depersonalize, if you like, some of the daily interactions, as you just heard about the conversations between entrepreneurs and managers, and how to bring about a greater cohesiveness of the team, quicker product development, resolving conflicts. These are just some of the benefits you'll get from doing a group assessment. So I encourage you to do that. If you reach out to me, I will give you for the next month a discount on the group assessment. Just email me, brett@inst.net, brett@inst.net, and I'll figure something out for your group. Thank you so much.